Hello, everyone. Before we get started, I wanted to include a warning about the content of this episode, as the episodes of Andor contain material related to assault and sexual assault. There will be discussion of those scenes in this episode. This is a warning. If you wish to skip those discussions, I will include timestamps in the liner notes. Now on to the episode. Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host, and with me for all of this season 2 of Andor is my good friend and yours, Missy. Welcome, Missy.
Hello.
We're excited to dig into this show, but, always when we start a new season of something or a new show, there's always sort of a volume of people who have never listened to What the Force before, and I wanted to take a moment just to quickly explain what you're getting yourself into. This will not be a surface level show. This will be a deep dive show. We're going to go into the mythology, the symbolism, motifs, themes that we see, and talk about what it's doing from a storytelling perspective, as well as what it might be doing to us as the watchers enjoying the show. Anything to add on that, Missy?
No, I'm excited. This definitely has given us something different. There's certainly a lot to dig into too.
Absolutely. So. And I would say that a lot of people don't necessarily associate Andor with, I don't know, the mythic or the fantastical that we have experienced in other Star Wars shows, because there isn't overt uses of the Force. There isn't lightsabers. There isn't Jedi. There isn't Sith, right? But those, although really do point to the mythic motifs a lot easier, doesn't mean that it's not in Star Wars. Any story can call to mythological folklore and fairy tale symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll call it out as we see it. There is a lot of symbolic elements that we're already seeing. And overall, we're also seeing sort of themes and motifs that are present across all the first 3 episodes, which are 1 year later, Sagrona Teema, and Harvest. Yeah. All right, let's dig into our overall themes and motifs. I'm going to start out with circles. So circles seem to be both a visual symbol as well as something that people are talking about in the actual text of the scripts and things that they'll say. So even from the start of the show, we hear people talking about being in a circle, being brought into the circle. And then throughout the course of the 3 episodes, we see many circle symbolic elements, either in the construction of the buildings, especially on Chandrila, and also in the movement of the traditions to do with the wedding. It's kind of everywhere. And, oftentimes circles are about binding. So we wear circular rings to say this is forever. And it can be about protection. It can be about union. But it can also be something where you're bound in, like they use circles in sort of witchcraft and other sort of magical things to bind evil in or bind good things in. So it can mean both things. And it's important to know directionally what is happening with them.
Yeah. And it's happening a lot in this. What we've seen so far of this story, circles are either joined or someone is breaking out of one.
Yes.
And that is what is happening over and over and over again in these. And so what you are seeing is that, like, well, do you want to be part of this circle, or is this circle constricting? Is it, to your point, is it binding the character, in which case they need or want to break out of it? Or maybe they don't realize they should be breaking out of it. And maybe, they are sort of joining a circle that is going to constrict them without realizing it.
And we actually had a comment on our last episode, which was just like the preview for season 2, all about how there was a repetitive use of polygons.
Yes.
In season 1, and that they're excited to see if there's going to be more polygons. And so far we've had kind of the opposite, which is we've had way more circles used. But it'll be exciting to see if that motif, and that was from Father Karis, which commented on YouTube. And I just wanted to call that out because, it's interesting to see the shapes that are used in both the set design as well as in the movement of the people.
Yeah. Yeah, and the circles were definitely very heavy in these 3 episodes. But that said, I still saw evidence of sort of that, polygonal emphasis, if you will.
Yeah,
and I do think it's going to continue to come up throughout. I think it probably depends on where they are and what those shapes are intended to express. So much of all the the octagons and whatnot last season were to sort of emphasize, especially like within Mon Mothma's apartment, we're supposed to emphasize how she was sort of trapped within the structure of the Empire, which is, of course, the gear and everything. And so there was a lot of that. And then you also saw, the 7-sided, what did you call that? Like, I don't know, 7-sided polygon, let's say.
Yeah.
In the prison episodes. And
Septagon?
Septagon? I don't know. Someone's going to tell us what it was, but you saw a lot of that. And, you talked a lot about the symbolism of 7 and everything during those episodes. And so it was very intentionally done. One thing I will note I find really fascinating is actually you don't see a lot of 3s. And historically in Star Wars, it's all about 3s. So it's fascinating that they're sort of playing in other areas with the number symbolism.
There was a lot of triangles in the tie that he stole.
Yes.
But they all ended up making a polygon.
Right, exactly. And the emphasis was always him being inside the sphere of the cockpit.
Yeah.
What was really kind of the point overall. And there's a lot of that in this as well. So circles, spheres, you see a lot of people contained within spheres in these episodes as well.
Which sort of inevitably leads us to the Death Star from a directionality perspective. So they're definitely doing this purposefully, which is interesting.
For sure.
Next one, Missy?
Yeah. So the other one that we noticed was the idea of life and community versus barrenness and isolation. So what we see throughout these episodes is that any place that is controlled by either the rebels or just the people, if you will, as opposed to the rulers of the empire, those areas are vibrant and growing. They're full of life. They're full of community. People are eating together. They're taking care of each other. They're farming, or they just happen to be in a very, life-filled area, like Chandrila is filled with life. And, what we eventually discovered to be Yavin 4 is filled with life and everything else. So these are areas which, they are they are emphasizing what we know is always true of those who oppose the empire, which is it is about growth and life and that community. And so it's cool that that sort of symbolism, which has a long history in Star Wars, continues. And then in the places that are controlled by the Empire, so the Sinar testing facility, and then later where Krennic has his
meeting,
his meeting, the Malthine Divide. Those places they're dark, they're cold, they are, barren and just no life at all. They are dead. And so you see that a lot. Another thing I want to notice, and this is just a very subtle thing that I caught in the sound design, actually, that emphasizes this point. Toward the beginning, there, when you encounter these life-filled places, all the sounds are very focused on life. There's crickets and there's other, like birds, whatever.
Or like the grain in the fields, like you could hear it.
Right. As things go horribly wrong, and especially as the Empire begins to encroach upon, the farming community and everything, you will hear more and more just flies. And when you hear flies by
associated
themselves,
with death,
carry-on flies. So it's I thought that was fascinating. I checked it on a second and third watch through to make sure I was catching it correctly. And if you pay attention, you'll catch, like, over time, the more that the Empire is present, the more it's signs of death and flies. So I thought that was fascinating.
That's used from a sound design perspective to represent, like, demons and, like, evil in a lot of things. Like, especially, like, horror movies or, like, anything to do with sort of that flavor. Wow, that's really cool. I didn't catch that, but I was also watching it on a train and on a plane.
I mean, that's fair. It was one of those things where it's just, it's... When you start, how when something tense happens and the music shifts slightly and you feel it more than hear it, right? It was the same thing with the flies. It was like, why do I feel suddenly horribly uncomfortable? It's because I'm hearing this creepy buzzing of flies, and you associate that with their buzzing around something dead, right?
It's very disorienting and unnerving. Yeah,
it is.
The next one I had was it's not. I guess it's sort of a theme, but it's the prisoner's dilemma. And this is specifically associated with sort of like the Rebel Alliance and where we're at with everything. And the prisoner's dilemma is a well-known thought experiment in classic game theory, where it demonstrates that self-interest leads to less than optimal outcomes for both parties involved, i.e. when faced with either betraying each other or cooperating to each other. Although it seems like you're giving up something by cooperating, you actually both end up getting what you want out of the situation. And I was just really struck by how much that reminded me of the line in Rogue One where we have Saw talking about Kriegers, separatists, Maya Pays, neo-Republicans, the Gorman Front, the Partisan Alliance, the Sectorists, the Human Cultists, the Galaxy Partitionists. Lost. All of them are lost. I'm the only one with the clarity of purpose. It's like everyone thinks that they're right. Right? And the problem is that everyone has to come to the table and form the Rebel Alliance so that they can actually coordinate and get what they want out of all of this. And Cassian, to his problem in this, like one of the problems he actually has is that he tries to sort of use them against each other in this, and he doesn't actually try to pull people together as much as he should. And it's absolutely a great way to show where the Rebel Alliance currently is and the main struggles that it has until the success, with Rogue One and with Yavin 4.
Right.
The last one. And we don't know what this means yet.
No, we don't. It's more like, hey, we're flagging this for later, but we're not entirely sure where they're going with it.
There's a lot of number 9s.
Yeah. 9 shows up a lot.
Yeah. And 9 is a sacred number, 3 times 3, right? 3 sets of 3s. It also is associated with the highest version of thought or progression before you are perfect, which is a 10. So it's the best you could possibly do without sort of becoming godlike, I guess.
Without nailing it. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we don't know what it means, but there's been multiple uses of 9 in the 3 episodes.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. And yeah, with that, we want to dig into the episodes, and we'll bring up lots of symbolism and different things associated with these across the episodes. So let's start with 1 year later, episode 1.
Yay!
We start out with Sonar, which is a test facility. I guess they're creating like different weapons or different new ties. I read what kind of tie this was, but yeah, it's something that
late,
appeared.
We're tired.
Yeah, it appeared in a video game. I'm jet lagged, but I love this scene where it basically like shows like how people join the rebellion in a very simple way.
Yeah, just a single act of bravery, and I loved it. You immediately like her, even knowing immediately out of the gate, just from her first appearance, that she's works for the Empire. You just like her even before you figure out that she's working with Cassian. She just comes across as a very sincere and appealing person right away.
And there's so much humanity in this scene. Like, she talks about how, like, she didn't want to look at him because she wasn't supposed to, but he's like, no, look at me. This is why this is important. And that human to human interconnection is absolutely what it's all about, because dehumanizing is the path of the dark side of the Empire.
Yes.
Humanizing is what the rebels have to do.
Yep.
And I love that there's flirting.
Yeah.
Even
or at least reference to it. Yeah.
Pretend flirting. And,
sure.
Yeah. And she does find him cute.
Yeah. And then her supervisor thinks he's cute, which is funny. But I think what I absolutely love most about this scene between the two of them is the fact that it specifically multiple times is calling to Rogue One. So much about this scene is foreshadowing Rogue One. The fact that the password is Kafrene, which is where Cassian's journey will start in Rogue One, is in the Rings of Kafrene. So that's calling forward to Rogue One. There is, we already talked about, being with you at the moment you step into the circle. So there's the circle, right?
Circle, yeah.
And, we talked about how the circle is many things. It is community. It is all these things, but it also is leading ultimately toward the Death Star. And then we also have, you're coming home to yourself.
And obsessed.
I know. But like in Rogue One, when he decides to go with Jyn to Scarif, and she says, I'm not used to people sticking around when things go bad. And he turns to her and says, welcome home.
Yeah.
So this is calling forward to that, the idea of coming home. Joining the rebellion is coming home. It's coming home to yourself. It's coming home to your community. This is home. And I thought that was so beautiful.
And even though she's like, I've had fun here, this has been a good place for me, I'm still willing to do this. Like, he understands, like, leaving a place of comfort is actually quite difficult, but she's doing the right thing. And then he ends it with, see you along the road, which totally ties to sort of a motif of, well, this is the start of your adventure.
Right.
And it's almost like he is himself a threshold guardian for her, because he is opening the gateway for her to go down this like her own story. And she's choosing to take on her own adventure.
Yep. Yeah. It was
so
really
good.
I loved it. It centered her for those, for those couple scenes. And I loved that. And I thought it was beautiful. And she was a great character. And I just immediately loved her very much.
I wonder if they're using a different sort of filter, because everything seems cold.
Yes.
And actually his red on his uniform seems to pop even more. Like tying back to that sort of cold, inhospitable versus, the life-giving planets that the rebellion is associated with.
Yeah, absolutely. So then also tying in with the whole step into the circle, he gets into the cockpit. It's a circular. It frames him, within the circle. And then getting into the whole concept of enclosure and entrapment and constricting. The hangar bay doors close. The Empire is closing in. They are entrapping him. And his only option eventually is to bust out. He has to bust out of that boundary, break through. And so, he literally blows a hole in the hangar doors and escapes that way.
And I think that this is an important theme and motif that we're going to see a lot of, that it's not going to be pretty. No. Any time that they do something, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be messy. There's going to be associated damage with it, collateral damage, but it will move them forward. Yeah. In it. I loved the fall into the gorge,
that was great.
Cave chase along everything. It was pretty entertaining as far as an opening
very fun
scene.
And exciting.
It was a lot of fun to see it at our celebration in front of the whole.
Oh my gosh, you did, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's
to see
cool.
the whole room, like, just absolutely obsessed with that.
I'll bet people loved it. That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we move on to, we're not really sure, but it's a farm planet. And
Mina Rao, that's it.
Mina Rao. And it's what turns out to be a nightmare Bix is having, but it's very creepy.
It's very creepy.
And we see sort of Dr. Gorsh in the mirror. And this, to me, sort of where Bix is at and her waking up and not being able to really escape this horror really solidifies to me an archetype that she's currently in. And she hasn't left it since last season, which makes me really sad. So life archetypes were first sort of, they've been around with us. They're part of our psychology, our archetypes deep within our subconscious, but they're called out by both Joseph Campbell and another writer, many writers over the years, but we particularly like K.M. Wayland, who talks about the life archetypes as far as writing. And we would say that Bix is in a damsel phase of the maiden arc, which is one of the earliest phases. And the damsel is classified by sort of two major things, which is that she is unable to really leave her constraints of something that has her trapped, very damsel-like. And the maiden itself is also constrained by being hunted by a predator. And that's going to be really important later on in these episodes.
Yeah, the maiden is dependent, and within the maiden you have the two shadow archetypes, which are the damsel, which is passively dependent, and the vixen, which is aggressively dependent.
Yeah, and they're usually dependent on a parental or a mentor figure.
Usually.
This is not the case necessarily, but they're unable to help themselves. Right. And until they decide to, basically. But even to the point where, like, hey, we should tell Cassian. Cassian, or like B says, Cassian will want to know. Because like it's not really her that's like fixing her own problem.
Right.
She needs other people to help her.
Right. And so, and it's interesting because this actually leads really well into the next scene where we now have Lita. And so Lita is, taking her maidens with her, and she wants to show them her wedding dress. And this is, to me, what solidified the fact that Lita is a swan maiden. And we've talked about swan maidens many, many times on this show. And in particular, swan maidens, they are frequently surrounded by other maidens, and they tend to be captured from that sort of safe circle of maidens, if you will, and then pulled into either the world of the mundane human lover or the demon lover, as the case may be, and sometimes they are one and the same. And what's so interesting is this is eventually what we see happen with Lita, is that she ends up her custody basically ends up transferring from the circle of her family, her parents, into the circle of her now husband's family. And this idea of like, the custody of the maiden transfers. So she never really reaches adulthood,
Right.
because she's just kind of being captured from one, safe circle to another safe circle. So I find this so interesting that you have Lita as this swan maiden that is being transferred in this way, and therefore she's also kind of a damsel.
Yeah. And we didn't really think that she would get very far, even with the wedding happening. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we see more of her story over the next episodes or not.
And when she shows, I mean, granted, the circles are everywhere in the set for Chandrila, but when she shows her maidens her wedding gown, it is perfectly encased in a circle behind it. So it is like, it shows that she's going to be contained.
Exactly. We have Mon and Perrin meeting with people, and Tay shows up, which adds some complexity to Mon's experience in the wedding, which is also pretty hectic, but he seems very stressed. But doesn't really indicate what's going on. But we see that actually what is going on that is also stressing out Mon, not necessarily Tay, is the fact that Luthen and Clea just showed up.
Yep. Yeah, they're there, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" So that's good. I also like that there's a guest that Mothma's talking to, and she says something to the, like, I guess Mon Mothma's just kind of flattering her and like tells her, "Oh, you look younger all the time." And this guest says, "How effortlessly you lie."
Yeah.
And I loved that line, because it's true. She has to lie constantly all the time. And so, it's this kind of statement, this judgment on her almost, like, how effortlessly you lie, like this comes easy to you. Like, and that's so interesting. And that's why I really think that the performance is just incredible throughout, because she has to make her emotions clear to the audience, but she is the entire time putting up a front for the other characters. And that's a very difficult thing to do.
I had a feeling when I was watching this episode, and I have no idea if this is going to be true. So this is just pure based on the feeling. I think Perrin is going to be a good guy.
I do too. Oh my God. I'm so excited that you feel that, because I was like, especially in the later episodes, I'm starting to feel it.
I either think that he is already involved in the rebellion, and Luthen just didn't want to tell Mon for some reason, because he's like that, or he will help her, because he seems to genuinely care about her.
Yeah. Well, there are several moments, and we'll get to this, but there are several moments where you can catch him like watching her, looking at her. Like, even the way he approaches the subject with Tay almost feels like he's actively trying to like warn her, to protect her. And so I'm very like,
we were so annoyed with him last season, but
I know, because he was such a pain, but I'm starting to wonder if he's playing a part.
I think he's playing a part. I literally thought, oh, he's actually part of the rebellion for some reason.
Well, even if he's not like actually part of the rebellion, I think he probably knows more than he's letting on.
Or
and I think
he's supporting her.
His role to like protect her.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you think so too, because I was like starting to be like, am I? I'm not sure. This might be. So
we're back to Mina Rao, and Will and Bila are a item.
They're
and also we have Brasso and Talia, who and to me, like, this totally ties to what we thought might happen this season, which is that there's just more love, right? Like, to me, it's that idea that when things are going awry, like, people seek human connection even more, and it seems like it's a good life there that they've built, which makes what happens even harder. They're trying to fix I guess, like a sprinkler or something. And in time for harvest, etc. And to me, like, farming always comes with a lot of themes around renewal, right? Like it's when you farm, when you take in the harvest, like there's always big celebrations because finally everyone has enough. Yeah. There's enough plenty, etc.
Yeah.
This planet itself is just pure creation from a thematic perspective.
And it's very much like the breadbasket of the galaxy is the way that it's presented.
Like
it's
Ukraine or the prairies in Canada.
100%,
like we have wheat on our flag in Alberta because of that. Like it is part of that.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, and to the Ukraine example, the Ukrainian flag is also supposed to be like, you know, the blue of the sky and then the yellow of the wheat fields. So it's like, that's literally like the symbolism there. And so I do think that's so interesting the way they present this as like, this is actually, even though it's very out of the way, it's also very critical to the Empire. It feeds them. They can't function without it.
Exactly.
And that also goes along with what we say about how the way that the Empire treats resources, which is to consume, and there's no thought for, you know, like care. And so, you know, seeing them there and engaging in farming and, you know, that requires, like you said, this sort of mutual care and everything and caring both for each other and for the earth. It's just something that the Empire doesn't understand.
Absolutely. And the Imperials arrive.
Yeah,
they're like,
because of course they do.
Because they ruined everything.
They ruined everything.
Everything.
I know.
And Bix looks so sad.
I know. I'm just so sad about Bix. I know. It's not fair.
I don't want to like speak ahead of it, but if she doesn't get her like moment to like live without being a damsel, I will be very sad.
No, same. I think it's not even just about not being a damsel. It's just like, I don't want her to just be a vessel for trauma.
Or just like sitting on the edge of the fridge waiting to be fridged.
Yeah, that too.
Like I'm just like worried. Like we don't get to see these episodes ahead of time. We're just like you. And so like we don't know, and I'm very worried about her.
I'm worried. Well, if you listen to our preview episode, like we're pretty convinced she's going to die, and so now with the context of these 3 episodes, I'm like, okay, but whereas before I had a lot of faith that they were going to do that well, I'm now very nervous because I'm like, well, now you're putting this character through even more trauma, and you probably are going to kill her. It's going to be a tough needle to thread to make that not piss me off.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see.
It's a problem often with men writers.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it like that, and we'll wait to see. We'll get to see what Tony does.
We'll see.
So Cassian lands on an unknown planet. We find out later.
Although I want to mention that I did actually guess it was Yavin 4 from that first shot. I was like, oh, jungle, it's Yavin 4. And then I was so pleased when I was right.
It was later on that I thought that it was Yavin 4, but yes, before we actually got to see like the temples and the ruins that eventually the Rebel Alliance builds their base in.
He says, "You're surrounded."
Yeah, but did you notice that ship?
What about it?
It's the ship that they all left.
Is it? No, I didn't catch that at all.
So that's probably the ship that he came to the planet in.
Okay. I got you.
And then was like dropped off on the new planet. And like, this is where his friend was supposed to be hanging out with his ship. What are they doing here all alone? They were abandoned, literally abandoned with like, it's not like they crashed. They were left there.
Yeah. Interesting.
There's a lot of weirdness about this situation that like, I still don't understand.
Yeah. I call this the Lord of the Flies subplot.
Oh, yeah. Fair.
In fairness, it is absolutely my least favorite part of this 3-episode arc. Every time they cut back to it, I was like, really?
I mean, it does what it needs to do, which is showing how the rebels don't necessarily automatically work together and without sort of genuine leadership and directionality, like that probably Maya was offering.
Yeah. But none of these characters were like charming or appealing. Like none of them, I didn't immediately gravitate toward them like I did, for instance, the woman in the opening scene in the testing facility, where like you immediately love her, right? But all of them, these people all suck, and that's why I was like, it's Lord of the Flies. If they all kill each other off, I will not care. I was just like, I didn't like any of these characters, and so it made it really hard for me to like stay engaged in the story. Plus, and this is the last thing I'll say before I stop ranting on this subject, but I really thought that this whole arc had a bit of an Ivanhoe problem or a Hobbit problem where your hero is out of commission for most of the,
it doesn't feel like he learns anything, and he doesn't do anything, and it just feels like we're here to sort of remind
observing.
us. And Lord of the Flies is a perfect way to describe this. But I don't get, I know sometimes why is like a bad question to ask, but I don't understand why.
No, see, I don't think why is a bad question to ask, because if you're going to spend screen time on something, there needs to be a reason for it. It doesn't always have to be a plot reason. There's many reasons you can have to maybe spend time on something.
Understand later, but right now it was really hard. So we don't know anything, but if he goes back to the planet and somehow rescues the remaining people, and somehow that turns into the Yavin 4 base or whatever, or he is the reason why they are rescued.
Sure.
I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, and that's fine, but that would be stronger again if any of those characters had been appealing enough for me to like care what happens to them. That was what was missing from that. They all sucked.
Were not great.
No, they all sucked. So all of that to say that, there are still moments that I liked, but generally I was like, nope, we can go back to the wedding now. I'm bored. So, But no, we actually go somewhere completely different. Wait, before we get to that, I do want to mention that the circle thing came up here again. You're surrounded, 15 blasters, he's enclosed and trapped in a circle, and that's how you know that he's going to be kind of stuck there for a while, is because he's been enclosed in a circle. So he like leaves the circle of the cockpit for the circle of his captors.
Right.
And, and then, over time we'll start to see that circle break apart. So, and he escapes through a hole in the circle, which is that they had a feud and they split up, and he was able to escape because of it. So it's all of the like entering the circle, breaking out of the circle is all there. So anyway, to your point, to the Malthine divide.
And we get a great voiceover, cut, edit, trans,
whatever.
Yeah. Movement between scenes.
Yeah.
Transition. With Krennic. Transition.
See, it's okay. We know words.
with Krennic actually doing a voiceover, talking about how there are no notes, no recordings, you will be stripped of your clothing and everything, and then we will wipe you down and send you on your way. And by the way, your supervisors, they're not in the know, and the Emperor will let them know personally. And even, Grand Moff Tarkin is not in the know. Which
and what I love about that is we know that Krennic is loving that, because we know what his relationship with Tarkin is like in Rogue One. So we know that he's just absolutely loving knowing something that Tarkin doesn't. And just in general, I was so excited. I knew we were going to see him, obviously, but I was so excited to have Krennic back, because he's hands down one of my favorite Imperials. And when I say favorite, I mean I love to hate him.
He's and how he's played is just perfect.
So good. I love him.
Of course, this is much like Hitler's Eagle's Nest.
Yes.
Our good friend Josh Johnson actually pointed out that it really looks a lot like from the 2001 film Conspiracy, which is amazing. I've never seen it, so I'll take your word for it, Josh. But he actually opens it up and says, this is a closed circle.
Yeah. The tightest of closed circles. So it's like right there out of the gate. Mm-hmm.
But we don't know what we're expecting. I actually was thinking like the like the Death Star project, right?
Yeah.
But it is because they use the terminology of the unlimited energy, which is the front by which the Death Star is being built.
Right. But do you know, we'll get to this, but do you know, he doesn't actually say unlimited energy. He says unlimited power.
Yes.
Which is a Palpatine quote. And I love that. I love that they're talking about energy, but then they use it as an excuse to have a Palpatine quote in there. And I was just like, I know you all are Star Wars nerds. I love it.
You giant nerds. But he turns on the Gorman video.
Yes.
Which is, the Gorman video talks about Gorman and the people, and it was sort of like Swiss a little bit, a little Swiss in its
it's got some Swiss in there,
some like maybe Scottish in there, maybe a little bit like with like the weaving and stuff like that. But we find out the secret behind Gorman weave,
Gorman twill,
and velvet is these spiders,
the Gorman spider,
or the gorlectopods, and they have a whole valley that wakes them up every day, and they do their little weaving, and everybody takes their threads, and then they have a mass market and artisans and people who want to produce beautiful garments all do that. And it makes me wonder why and this is just like a side note, why everybody is dressed horribly in don't have as many nice clothing in the future movies is because of this eventual disaster.
Interesting. So your primary source of quality textiles in the
has been
galaxy
destroyed.
Was gone.
Because compared to the prequels where everybody's dressed all beautiful and fancy and
no, you're right,
everything
totally.
Like that.
I buy it. Yep, I get it.
All right, so spiders. They are the ultimate creators. They are a symbol of femininity, weaving, which of course has its own symbols behind it, and they are sort of a symbol of and spiders are really interesting because they've been in Star Wars for a while, but they're often associated with nature that is beyond human control. But that doesn't seem to be what's happening in Gorman. The Gorman sort of live in
it's like a symbiotic
balance.
Relationship.
Yeah,
right?
they live in balance with the spiders themselves, which is not something that we've necessarily seen in this. Of course, weaving itself is associated with feminine independence and also feminine as a specific feminine power. It is associated with creation activity. That you can create clothes for yourself that offers protection. Wearing clothing is protection. And it creates something from nothing, which is considered to be quite magical in some ways. And so weaving is associated with magic as well as it's associated with the fate of a person as well. So there's a lot going on with using spiders.
Yeah. And weaving, I want to get a little further into the whole weaving as fate thing, is that, weaving, fate, balance, peace. When you have a correct and strong weave of something, like a piece of fabric that is woven well, the suggestion is that all things are as they should be. But when you have a fraying or an unraveling or a tearing, this indicates destruction and separation. And so when you consider that the weaving is not only creating the textiles, but it is also, as we said, this symbiotic relationship between the Gorman and the spider, the idea that their planet is now under threat is that sort of unraveling and that fraying and that destruction that you're looking at, and sort of, the galaxy coming apart at the seams, if you will. And so
beautiful.
It's really interesting where they're going with that.
Did you notice the Gorman seal of excellence?
I didn't. What did it look like?
It's a circle that is like webs on the outside and sort of like a stylistic spider on the inside.
Oh, that's so cool.
But it's a circle.
So awesome. I love there were so many little things like they also had a shot of the bas relief in the background in the room that they were in
Mm-hmm.
while they were watching the video, and there's a blindfolded figure on the wall,
Oh, cool.
which I thought was incredibly cool. I was like, "Oh, sweet, that's awesome." Because again, it's not everyone knows what's going on here. They don't have the full context. They don't really know what all this is going toward. So there's a level of like, you're kept in the dark about something, basically. I also liked that, similarly before the video starts, the doors, the blast doors close over the window, and that goes
Yeah,
back to that whole idea of enclosure and
Yeah.
entrapping and like, the binding you inside. And so, all of them are trapped. And that's called back to later then, when Dedra and the director of ISB are talking, and
She tries
he
to
says,
leave. Yeah.
right, and
she's
he's like, no, we're in.
Yeah.
Like there is
Yep.
no leaving. You can't get out, right?
Just take the win.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's very important. So
I loved how they described Gorman as a peaceful metropolis.
mhm.
But that Gorman pride.
Yep.
That Gorman pride, right?
Yep.
And it reminded me a lot of countries that are actually quite well off, that have figured out how to operate their major industry. So I'm specifically thinking of New Zealand and their kiwi industry. They process all of these kiwis from all over the islands and bring them all into a central agency that then distributes them globally. And it reminded me of that with like the 40 billion amount of
bolts of
weave,
fabric,
whatever it is that they produce, and they bring it all to Palmo, and then they work to make sure that it's all handled well. So it's also this idea of working together, that community and collective.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like we take great pride in this one thing that we create for all the galaxy, that we do in cooperation with our spiders and all this other, so it's just this idea of this, tightly woven, so to speak, community that you have there, and potentially that the Empire wants to destroy all of it. And so that kind of brings us to mining again, Marie Claire.
Yes, let's talk about it. So it's of great interest to the Empire. Did you want to finish this whole like Gorman eagle's
let's just
nest?
cover all of it at once, shall we?
Yeah. So there's calcite in the Demdare Hills. I mean, Planet Core. Right?
Yep.
It's calcite. And they're like, calcite is what's important because we need it to coat the reactor. It's the reactor for the Death Star to power the main weapon. Of course, we know that as people who are watching, who know all of the things. Little do they know that, though.
Yep.
The stark challenges to the local population, it's gouge mining.
Yeah.
The planet will be in risk of total collapse. So, what is mining from a motif perspective in Star Wars? And this is so interesting because it does show up in like other stories in our culture, but mining specifically has been brought up in almost every single piece of media in Star Wars.
Yep.
It is a symbol, a metaphor used to describe the creep of the dark side. It is the quick and easy path to eat up a number of resources that are essentially depleted. And then the surrounding area and population are poisoned and potentially make the space unlivable. And how this connects to sort of the psychological motifs deep within caves, deep within the darkness, is always the treasure that you need. This is the way to get the treasure through an industrial means. This is like the dark side version of the folklore lost mine motif, where you have to go into the lost mine to find the treasure and you find yourself along the way. Digging. And we see this a lot in Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
Right? With the dwarves that dug too deep. And we see this a lot with them, with the Uruk-hai and how they're digging up the land and everything like that. We do see it in other stories, especially onomatopoeias. But this one specifically in Star Wars, it's always associated with the dark side. We usually see the population either subjugated or joining the army. So they often set up bases to recruit people in same locations, and shows greed, consumption, and the using up of the galaxy's resources without any renewal or creation.
Right. Yeah, it's like the killing of the golden goose, basically.
Yeah.
It's like saying we're going to take all this treasure, but we're not going to leave in place anything that would enable renewal or, replenishment of those resources. It's just gone. We've destroyed it all. And so that's really interesting. And what's fascinating about it, to your point about, sometimes pressing people into service or whatever. In this case, what they're doing is they're actually choosing to build an armory in Palmo, which is going to be their excuse for an increased security presence, because they don't have one there right now because there haven't been any issues. So they're literally it's Cop City, basically. They're building, a facility that will enable them to be there and therefore,
and
create
sometimes you end up finding more problems because you're right. Like that's one of the things that people have found even in our society, is that having more cops around means you find more crime. Right.
Exactly. So they've really had no issues up to this point, but they're going to create issues literally by just being there. So there's that. And that brings us to what the Ministry of Enlightenment is doing, which of course is an ironic name. It's their propaganda ministry.
Yeah, they full on name them D. Shembo and Nisus Orsa or something like that. Like it's really close to that. But I can't read my writing. It was plain writing. Like they're like, anything that you've thought about the gore, we made you think that. Like they're like terrible PR guys.
They're horrible.
Spiders are aggressive, and their secrecy, and they're mocking Imperials. The arrogancy of the gore, that was us. And they talk about all of the things that they've done to like make you think certain ways. But like Deidre herself does not think this is smart.
Yeah, Dedra doesn't buy any of it. She's like, nope. Dedra's like, no. But Krennic clocks her. He knows that. Yeah, he's like, okay, so what do you think of all this? And, I specifically wanted you here for your opinion. And she's like, tries to sort of be like, well, she tries to kind of beg off. And then he presses her, and she says, well, no, you need insurgents, rebels that you can rely on to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, you basically need an enemy to fight to give you an excuse to take over the population and to do the unthinkable.
Yep, exactly. So she's telling him to instigate, effectively.
Yep.
So.
Exactly.
Yep.
Oh, man. This was such a cool scene, and
I loved it.
I loved it so much. It feels familiar, even though it was brand new.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say there were parts of these 3 episodes that felt less Star Wars-y. This was definitely one of the more Star Wars-y scenes, I think, that we got, for sure.
I loved the film reel. I know we're coming back a little bit to it, but I loved the film reel. It reminded me of the 1930s film reels. I thought it was great. I thought it was classic George Lucas, because he in actually the animation panel, they talked about how he was trying to get that feel for the Clone Wars.
Yeah, well, they have the newsreels at the beginning of every episode of the Clone
Exactly. Wars. And to have that sort of thing, it just makes me think what does the HoloNet news look like?
Yeah, I'm very curious.
I want to see it. This is sort of a weird way glimpse into that a little bit.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what mass communications looks like, because we still don't really have a view of that.
No, we don't. No.
Yeah.
Back to our Chaos Rebels in Andor and Cassian.
Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies, yeah. They can't agree with anything, and they keep on fighting, and there's this person, Maya's dead, your brother betrayed me. That was kind of like the two sides. Maya's dead. Your brother betrayed us all.
Yeah.
And I can't get over this one line because like Cassian is like being held by one guy over. His name is Krabs, which is a great name too. But he can't teach her if he's dead. So they're talking about the female pilot. Like, why don't we just like threaten to kill him? And you can't teach her if he's dead. We can't actually threaten to kill him because he'll know. Yeah. Right. And then everything with you is negative. And I was like, this is the dumbest fight.
Exactly. And that's the problem, is that you spend all the time with like, oh God, these people are they're such idiots. And it's frustrating. But I don't know. It's like again, if you step back and take a high level look at it, I think I understood some things, which is that, they should have been allies, but they were feuding, they were hungry. And so what you get out of this is starting this view of like, remember, because the Rebel Alliance breaks up briefly at the end of Rogue One before they decide to help out at Scarif. And so this is kind of again foreshadowing that, and it's sort of a lesson for Cassian about the risks when you have a rebellion like this, especially so decentralized and kind of a lot of different groups and everything, rebel cells, is that they're not organized, they're not unified. It takes very little to break them down. I mean, like he said, 2 days without food and they're at each other's throats.
Yep.
So it doesn't take much. And so there's a lot of lessons, and there's a lot of practical aspects of this. So for example, pretty much all of Cassian's dialogue in these scenes throughout all the episodes, actually, or I guess the first two, is him making practical suggestions. You should bank water. You should establish a perimeter. You should, he's always giving kind of tips and advice that are tactical recommendations. And these people are dumb as rocks, and they don't do any of the stuff of that stuff.
But he also tries to turn, when he's individually with somebody, he tries to turn them against the group.
Yes. Right. Which doesn't work. And I feel like that's also a lesson.
Yeah.
That it doesn't, his attempts to do that are not effective. And it's not to anyone's benefit for them to, betray one another.
Exactly.
It ends badly for all of them.
It absolutely does.
They reference beasts in the forest at one point, and that's kind of your first hint that there might be something else. As they
do. The beasts in the forest. Did we want to talk about what that means symbolically?
Yeah, I think we should.
So, to me, the beast in the forest, Joseph Campbell talks about how oftentimes the howl of the wolf or the beast at the door is a herald of the change.
Yep.
So the howl, the beast, is showing Cassian, because this all has to be viewed from his eyes, as the main observer of the breakdown of these rebels, is that this cannot function this way. He is picking up a lesson, a piece of information that he needs to carry along the way.
Yep. Yeah. It's very interesting. So
yeah, but he calls
them
to the
out. Wedding. Oh no, I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're right. You're right.
That's all right. Back to the wedding and to a really amazing moment between Clea and Vel, which I freaking loved. It was so fun. So Vel's there. She's not pleased to see Clea or Luthen. So she's just like, what are you doing here? Clea's like, I'm working. And, okay, well, do we know each other? No, you come by the gallery sometimes. It's fine, blah, blah. And then she says, just two single women surveying the prospects. And that is her basically asking Vel if she's interested.
Yeah.
And Vel kind of gives her this very unimpressed once over and walks away.
Yeah.
And it's the most amazing moment. I was just like, oh my gosh, snubbed.
yeah. But, Val is very much taken.
She is. But we also find out later that she really hasn't talked to, Cinta in a long time, hasn't seen her in a long time. But I just love the idea that she just shuts Clea down immediately. Clea was like, yeah, you interested? And Val's like, no.
No.
It just walks away. And then That's not the reason, but I like to think that that's like a small part of the reason why Clea was like, yeah, I'm going to leave this wedding early.
I gotta go. I gotta go get back to my communications back room. I really loved the conversation with Perrin and Scullin.
Sculdin, I think.
Sculdin.
Yeah. So it's all these names are so funny. Like Sculdin is like skullduggery. Like the whole idea is that he's like a thug, right? You know, so all the names are like that. So
about the kids basically, and they're like looking on them. They're like, "Hey, what's going on with the kids?" And he's like, "Lita's a hard one. Like, is your kid ready?" And he's like, "Nope,
no,
nope." You do get this like quick little mini moment with Luthen talking to one of the sort of naval people from Chandrila, I think.
It's like another member of this sort of upper class of Chandrila who's apparently their whole family goes into the Navy, and his son is now going into the Navy as well.
Yeah, but everybody's leaving from Steerguard. It's like, well, where are they going? He's like full spy mode.
They don't show the response, so we don't actually know, but they're all being, directed somewhere else. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We have T and Mon now sees how bad everything is for Tay, which is again tying to this thing that we're seeing with the rebels. Like things have started to get bad for Tay, so he's willing to give up on kind of everything that he has sort of helped Mon create with the Foundation. Yeah. He's willing to burn it, at least, or burn that.
And remember, they were ideologically aligned in the last season. Yep. Like the whole reason he agreed to help out was because he also had rebel sympathies. And so this idea that like he was that, but now that it's affecting his business and his like family life and everything, now he's like, I don't know, I don't like this. I don't like the way this is affecting me personally. And so he's upset and he's drinking and,
his wife broke up with him. He's got business problems, but the Foundation is fine. And look at your wedding that you're posting here. I'm sure you can afford to pay me.
Well, we're getting to that part because that comes next episode. But for this, we started to get the initial hint of Mon is like aware that there's a risk whereas there wasn't one before, she's kind of suddenly aware that Tay is a risk. Then Stekken's mom comes up and is like, oh, they just had their first fight, you might want to go check on Lita. And so Mon goes to find Lita, who's crying on the floor in the ballroom, and asks her what's wrong. And Lita says, he's a child, he won't hold my hand, I keep trying and he keeps pushing me away. And like, this is, especially, I know but like as a mom, this is like just the most crushing thing. Like, because for Mon, this is just confirming all her fears, right? Yeah. Which is that this is not right for her daughter. It's not going to make her happy. And she hates seeing her sort of repeat the same mistakes that she feels she made and get pressured into a life that Mon realized after the fact she didn't actually want.
Yeah, I would say so, but I would argue that she doesn't know, like Mon herself doesn't know what she has with Perrin. Like I really,
I agree. Like, I'm talking about like her perspective at the time that this happens. But yes, I would agree.
Yeah, and so she's like, "Hey, let me give you a hug, and comfort you." But we don't really see much more of that because she's kind of like, "I can't really tell you this is a bad idea."
Well, but that's the thing. Maybe things would have been different if she did. I think it's important to note that by the time she does, she probably waited too long. And that's, that's kind of a thing, is that like Mon, because she had ulterior motives for allowing this wedding to go forward, she didn't tell Lita when she should have, about her own regrets, about, how she really felt about this tradition, what she thought might be good for her. She had an opportunity to influence Lita in a positive way, and she didn't take it, and she missed her chance.
One of the things that is really important as a parent is actually to share your own stories of your life when you were the age that your child is.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's, I don't know. to me, like, did you notice that like one of her braids is cut too?
Yeah.
Because she's engaged.
Yep. Yeah. That was
And
the
then the
engagement.
other one cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Cool.
We'll get to the symbolism of the braids and everything. So
yes. What's next?
Well, the feud in the jungle erupts into open conflict. The episode ends, and we are on to Sagrona Teema.
Sagrona Teema.
Yep.
Yep. So we start out with Cassian again in the woods. And Crab and Rika are, well, some bad stuff has happened to them both. And so they're each side is looking for what is left of them. And they're crawling through the mud to not awaken the beasts or to show themselves to the other side. And yeah, one person finds a foot in a shoe and one person finds goggles.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. And this is where we get Cassian, suggesting that they should bag water, do something productive instead of just like being paranoid about what they're doing. And they go through like phases of paranoia, the rebels, like, oh, maybe they're just playing mind games. Maybe they think that we know what they know. Like it's
And every time they send someone out to like scout, they think they're dead or they think they turned on them or whatever. They're like always convinced that like whoever they just sent out, has either been killed or betrayed them. And they're just, it's like they don't, there's no solidarity among them at all.
Yeah, exactly. We get Deidre and the director coming back to the ISB. And they're, she tries to basically get off of this, and he's like, you don't have a choice.
Yeah, you can't get out of this project, so make the best of it. And, he criticizes her approach to the Axis project. It sounds like she's been, really obsessive about it for a couple of years, but has not obviously had any success identifying or tracking down Axis. And so he tells her basically that it's a dead end, and he's saying, no, Gorman is a gift, take it and then win it. Yeah. So, encouraging her to own this.
Exactly. And then we have Luthen and Clea, who are kind of stressed because we've had these little moments throughout the first episode and then also this episode where they haven't heard from Cassian. They don't know what's happening other than the mission was a success as far as they can tell.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're moving in the Shandy Merle, which is just a fancy statue.
It is very fancy. It's an idol. But yeah, so Clea says that, she needs to head back to Coruscant in order to have, the good comms. And Luthen tells her she needs a ride, and she goes, oh, I've got one. And here's what's weird. We never find out
how she gets
who
there.
That ride was. I'm very curious. What do you think?
I don't know.
I'm skeptical too. I mean, maybe it was Cinta. Maybe.
I
don't know. I'm not sure. I'm just wondering. I'm very curious. Also, like, the other thing about it is the way that scene is shot. Just as she trails off saying, like, he goes, you need a ride. And she goes, I've got one. Like the camera backs up and Perrin comes into view, like watching them. And this is one of the first things I have where I feel like Perrin probably knows more than we think right now, because he's watching Clea and Luthen. What interest does he have in them?
Yeah.
What does he know?
He's probably figured it out a while ago.
I think he's figured out something. I agree.
They're sneaking in Skulden's surprise.
Yeah.
So he's seen all this happening. But this is back to the conversation about him sort of warning Mon.
Yeah, about Tay.
Yeah. Tay, is he not your lover? Like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's that, but there's also like, I mean, when you really rewind and look at the whole scene, like he starts with like, oh, you ate already. So he's checking on her to make sure that she's eaten something. And then it's not really remarked on, but about 2 seconds later, he offers her tea and she just takes it and takes a sip. And it's like this weird, like, he's like caring for her and she doesn't really seem totally aware of it. And then, And then he's, again, he's like, oh, haha, you tell your boyfriend to go easy on the nog. He had to be carried out last night or whatever. And she's like, what? And so he's warning her, loose lips sink ships. Like he's like trying to say, like, you've got a loose cannon. You need to take care of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah. So this is definitely where I started suspecting that Perrin might be secretly a good guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see.
Oh, but the final like blow, because like he does say like pace yourself or pay the price. He was always weak.
Oh, and that felt personal. Then that's where it goes back to the whole thing about like, oh, isn't he your lover or whatever? I almost feel like he's genuinely hurt at the idea that could be true.
Yeah, but she denies it, of course. She does. Like she's like, no, we're not together. But I kind of feel like it's like, why didn't you trust me with this?
Yeah. A
little bit. Like
I could see his weakness. Why couldn't you?
Yeah. Or I'm strong. Like
I'm stronger. Why don't you appreciate my strength? Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It is interesting. It was definitely after last season, it was a different perspective on Perrin. That's for sure. So,
yep. We find out more about what's going on with the Imperials coming to town with the farmland.
Yep.
They're all chatting about like different strategies, like stay ahead of them or like fall behind them, or do we leave? Well, we can't leave without Cassian showing up because he's late. All of that.
And this is a deeply uncomfortable in terms of being very deeply uncomfortable topic in terms of being like very current, because they're talking about how they're vulnerable because they're undocumented workers. They don't have visas. And so it's hard to watch in our current context. But I think it's also good that it's so relatable and it's like you understand it in a very deep way. And so I'll also point out that during this conversation, Bix is in this spherical enclosed space. She's inside this, room kind of under the silos doing her repairs. And so it sort of starts
her tower. Right. Her damsel tower.
But it also starts to, again, foreshadow the fact that she's going to be entrapped and threatened in this way because she's inside that circular space, which is contained, and because the other characters are outside, she's inside.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it's like the way that all of the blocking is done in this scene. It's like it's very deliberately containing her in there versus the rest of them are outside of that.
Yeah. And we flash back to the rebels who are just trying to figure out food.
Yep. Yeah. And the fact that they all have like rotten food available, both factions only really have rotten food available. It suggests sort of the rot within the rebellion as they are feuding. It is sort of like they are rotting. They're being destroyed from the inside. Cassian's still offering that tactical advice. Hey, you need to make a perimeter. All of this kind of stuff. Then there's a really interesting segue where they talk about eating the melons on a dare. I dare you. Yeah. And then in the following scene with Cyril, he talks about there's a future here for those who dare. Yeah. So there's these kind of different views on, what you would do if you dare. Yeah. But what no one dares to do is to cooperate.
Right. Yeah.
So
I love the line, a cabal of corrupt purchasing agents.
Yes. Yeah, and he says it with such drama and flair. Like his bureaucratic victories.
Yeah, like I'm the police. I've found the corrupt cabal. Yeah.
And when he snaps in the kid's face to get his attention, he's like, hey,
the Bureau of Standards, there is a future here for you. Yeah. Yep. He's looking good in his like little suit.
He's adorable. I think we just love like sad, pathetic men. And so he's just like adorable. It's so sad for him, but he's so cute. And then they get So then we go back to Minarao, and this is where I want to mention you really do first start to hear the flies start to appear in the sound design. So listen for that. And it suggests the approach of death because now, first Will and Bila have their really cute little scene, and then you see, the Imperials arrive. And of course, specifically
he's setting their expectations. I might have to leave. I might have to leave the planet. I might have to just leave across the,
Yep.
I might have to leave, but promise not to leave without saying goodbye, which is unfortunately part of the downfall of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he holds to that promise, but there are consequences.
There are consequences, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so the soldiers approach kind of like the silo area where all of like the supplies are and the drinks and everything like that. It's like, where's the lieutenant? Oh, he's basically with Bix.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this is the first suggestion, and then you hear it again later. But this is the first suggestion of everyone he's traveling with knows exactly who he is and what he does.
Yeah. Exactly.
They know. They know what he's about. And it's upsetting, but not surprising. And so he approaches Bix. Bix is, again, she's in that enclosed circle, that enclosed sphere. You hear the flies again as he approaches, and it's all like just this just deeply unsettling moment of like, she's trapped. She has this at her back. During their conversation, she releases a valve, and that, the press of air indicates that like the rising pressure and tension in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's so uncomfortable and sad.
Yeah. And, she like tries to deflect him with like, my husband wouldn't approve and all of that stuff. But fundamentally, this character now is our predator archetype for Bix.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. And it's like so recognizable, and yet so sad that she does have to use like this idea of the husband to kind of protect herself.
And he only stops when Brasso comes. Like, that's also like another male, her coworker or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm,
so, yeah.
Yeah, and it's,
sucks.
It sucks. It sucks because it's sad and from a story perspective, but it's also sad in terms of how much it reflects reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it is.
Then we have the wedding hike, which so we're kind of like on day 2 of the wedding prep.
Right.
Like there's 3 days total, which is significant. Like a lot of things happen in 3 days in sort of traditions. But they have to hike to this top of this mountain and get the elders' blessing.
Yep. Yeah.
Essentially. But you do hear Lita talking to her betrothed about how she'd be allowed to do more things now that she's going to be getting married, but that's not necessarily true.
No, it isn't. And that's the thing. She goes, I've always wanted to. Mother wouldn't allow it. It'll be different now. And the thing is that this indicates that one of her primary motives for the marriage is to get away from what she feels like is Mon's restrictions on her. And again, this goes back to, there's so many things happening here. There's, how much has Mon kind of been an overbearing mother that doesn't allow her to do anything? And, so does she carry some responsibility for that? Or is this just Lita, kind of being in a rebellious teen phase, and she just really wants to get away and to escape? And she, to your point, is walking into a situation where she's not going to have more freedom.
It's interesting because she walked into an entirely conservative traditionalist like thing to escape her more liberal mother,
right
and yet she expects more freedom. I don't know. I don't know, friend.
No, but I don't know. I just think there's so many things about it. To me, it speaks to this idea of people believing that these oppressive systems will protect them. That if you are just inside the system, then you are protected. So she believes that by being part of this patriarchal system, she will be safe. She will be protected. That's what she believes. That's why she was so hung up on like safe in the braid last season and everything. That was her whole thing. And so it's so sad But then there's also references to the circles again, because, Mon says to Vel, oh, yeah, well, everything old is new again. And that, again, references this idea of the circle, and actually kind of the Ouroboros to some extent, this idea of, we just kind of repeat this cycle, and it's not going to change until someone breaks it. So this gets back to this idea of breaking out of the circle, right? You have to break the cycle to get out of it. And unfortunately, Lita's not doing that right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we move back to Cassian, who
wait, Dedra first, I think.
Is it?
I don't know. I know what happened with Cassian.
It's
Go
just
ahead.
they're talking about. So it's a very brief scene where they talk about how we have the pilot, they have the ship. It's the same mold, right? Like turning, like they talk about how they're like turning the ship, right? So they're they're turning, and the other team is like, or the other group is like turning the ship manually through brute force,
that's right.
Because they know the one button that can shoot.
Yeah. They're like, well, we know we can use the cannon.
We know we can use the guns.
Yeah.
But yeah, that and Cassian's like, well, by nightfall they might have a chance at shooting us, so maybe we should figure something out. And to me, this reminds me of the Death Star because of how slow it is, right? Turning slowly. Well, you have to do something.
Getting into position.
Into position. This being Yavin 4. Like it's all the same like echoes throughout this whole story.
Good call. No, I think that's spot on.
Yep. Well, we are back to Deidre being in her apartment, and guess who walks in? Were you shocked by this?
Not really. I mean, I was so happy. Expected it. I was happy, but it was just like, I guess there are aspects of it that surprised me. Like before he walks in, she's kind of listening to operatic music, and her hair is down. She seems upset about something. But when he walks in, she immediately like silences the music, which I thought was also interesting. It almost feels like she's like not comfortable with sharing that part of herself or something. So that was very interesting. But yeah, he comes in and they're so domestic. Right? Oh my God.
I know. I was like, they're living together?
He brought groceries.
He went grocery shopping.
He asked her how her business trip was.
Oh my God. They lived together.
So I was like, oh my God. That was so funny. But yeah, like her hair's down. She's all chill. And he's like, I don't really want to do this. And she's like, oh, we can't cancel again. She's like touching his mouth and everything.
Oh my God. She grabbed his face and touched his mouth. And I was like, this is like the most intimate thing.
I was like, I don't know if I was expecting the intimacy coordinator for this one.
Well, like they did say at the Andor panel that they get spicy. And I was like, they get spicy?
What? No.
They get spicy? What?
Oh my God. I don't know if I can handle it. I just like, so okay. Was I surprised he walked in? No. Was I surprised about their storyline in this
that they've progressed to living together?
Absolutely. No, more than that. Just even what we see in the next episode, I was like, what? So like it's fun, and it puts me in a weird place where I'm like,
you're cheering for this space fascist?
Yeah. I'm like, these are some of the most appealing characters right now, and they're horrible people. Who are going to do horrible things. And I'm just like, this is weird. But it's fun. I'm having a good time, even though it's weird. So, yeah.
Yeah, but, even Hitler had a wife.
That's true. Yep. So, it was just funny. But, yeah. So, so if you want to talk about the thing that surprised me, I will say I had zero ideas about who it was that they were going to be meeting for.
I absolutely knew it was going to be the mom.
You knew?
After this, I was like, they're living together. He doesn't want to do it. She's like, I want to meet your mom. She probably doesn't have family or doesn't have anything.
So you called everything. I got it. Okay. Yeah.
I do have a problem with the mom scene though, because realistically, my experience is very different.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So, but yeah, so that very interesting scene. And then we're back over to the wedding again. And again, Perrin is always watching either Mon or Luthen, and sometimes Tay. He's like there are times the camera focuses on him and he's just observing. And given that we've been led to believe that he's just like flighty and shallow.
Just
and
a guy.
Yeah.
You know who he could be?
What? Tell me.
The Scarlet Pimpernel.
Well, you're going to have to explain because I don't remember that story.
You don't know the Scarlet Pimpernel? Okay, so the Scarlet...
I'm sorry.
Okay. The Scarlet Pimpernel is written by Baroness Orczy, who was written during the French... Well, it's set during the French Revolution, and he's an Englishman who goes and rescues, like, basically aristocrats from France before they're guillotined.
Ah.
And he himself, Sir Percy, is considered to be a foppish man of fashion who only parties the day away and does not do anything useful.
I like
and
it.
his wife is involved in like protecting people and helping people, but they don't know that they're both on the same side.
I love it. No, I love it, Marie Claire. I need it now. This had better be it or I'm going to be pissed. Because it's really good.
If he uses the word Scarlet Pimpernel, I will just be like, I give up. I have win everything.
You're just like, Kathleen, call me. I got you.
What's really cool about the first book is that they actually like he loves her so much, but he thinks that she is like not. She's committed a crime where it led to the death of a bunch of people, and so like it's like he thinks that she turned in a bunch of the aristocrats to be killed. And so they're married, but they like don't seem to get along, but they actually are working together.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
I really need it. But yeah, so we get back to Parrot and he's observing, he's watching. And so something's up and, so Tay finally catches up with Mothma, and this is where we finally get his basically ultimatum, really, which is that he says that he's feeling undervalued, and he is effectively blackmailing her because he knows what she's doing to an extent, and that's valuable knowledge, and he needs money. So she's either going to pay him off or he's going somewhere else, and that is the entire implication. She understands it immediately. She's horrified. I would suspect that part of the reason she's horrified is even though she's in denial, I think she knows exactly what that means in terms of how things are going to work out for Tay.
Yeah.
I think she knows right away.
Yeah. Luthen needs her. And as soon as she's exposed, then it brings down everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. So she cannot be risked, and therefore any risk to her must be neutralized, one might say. So yeah, so I think she understands immediately, like, oh crap, I'm in trouble. This is not going to end well for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so she's from that point onward, you see her in kind of a panic. Then we're back to Clea, who returns to the gallery. Are we going to talk about some of the things in the gallery, Marie Claire? I'm so excited.
I didn't even really look, although I should have. Oh my goodness.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, first note, the overhead shot when they come in, landing platforms, bunch of circles, she's within one of the circles. So again, with that theme there. So she comes in, turns on the lights and walks past Padme's travel headpiece from Attack of the Clones.
Oh my God.
I lost my mind. I was like, oh my God. I'm so excited.
That is so cool.
I was nerding out. I was just like, this makes me so happy. So anyway, it's literally just an Easter egg, but I'm not usually an Easter egg person, but they made a real point to make sure that you see it because it's in the foreground of the shot. And I was like, yeah, okay. So I was pretty stoked about that. And then, so then we're back to the wedding again. And Mon tells Luthen she's going to, quote, find a number, by which she means find a price for Tay. But already Luthen is hinting that will not be enough. Yep.
And he's going to have to deal with him. It doesn't quite say like, he doesn't quite say like, let me kill him for you until later. But yeah, this is when we get the beautiful Perrin speech, which I cannot wait to talk about.
I am also excited to talk about it because especially given our suspicions, there's so many angles to look at it from.
So he starts out by talking about Sagrona, which is to greet you. And then Sagrona Teema, which is good health to you. And then Sagrona Teema Salam, which is his hope. And that Lita and Stekin will know that pain will follow them. But his Salon Stena is that you will find the joy. And this is literally a rewrite of George Lucas's speech. It is literally the one that I talk about in my Seek Joy episode, where you have to find joy because it is... Joy has no wind at its back. Joy will not announce its arrival. You have to listen for it. You have to listen, be mindful, because it is fleeting and delicate. You have to search out these treasures. And so joy, much like follow your bliss from a Joseph Campbell perspective, is the compass by which you can find your own path and your own way through pain and suffering and what it is to live. And it is the way you find yourself to the light in Star Wars, following your joy. He does sort of play it off as like simple pleasures of meals and things like that, but he uses joy so specifically, and it made me want to cry.
Aww.
On the train in Japan.
Aww. See, and I was so focused on him emphasizing, the fleeting, shallow pleasures.
No.
And I felt, but I felt like that is probably what Mon took from that speech. I think she was probably hearing pleasure, gaiety, amusement, pleasing sensations, laughter, good company, the comfort of a fine meal. Like, none of these are like the soul deep joy. These are all kind of like surface comforts that he has as a member of this privileged class. Now, to your point, I sincerely believe there was more depth to his speech, but I think that Mon only took away, here's my shallow husband, and all he cares about are his own comforts and pleasures, and he doesn't care about anything else. And so I don't think that she at this point in time believes that they share that, again, that deeper commitment to something greater.
My hope is that you learn to reach past this constant cloud of sadness, is what he says. And he does go into pleasure, gaiety, amusement. Like, he's like, these things are going to get you through. But there's the music buried beneath the noise is joy.
Right.
Like, he talks about those like kind of shallow things, but then he's like, no, joy is more important than even those things. It's just, it's like, it's perfect. It's perfect. Why did they write this show for me?
I don't know. Not very clear. Oh my God. And then we get to officially the dumbest part of this whole thing. And I get that it's supposed to be comedic, but I was just so like, oh my God. The only redeeming aspect of this to me is the fact that it signals the end of this arc. But the rebels challenge one another to like a duel. They choose their seconds and everything. They talk about Roski rules, total submission, blah, 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 blah.
They play rock, paper, scissors.
And then it turns out to be rock, paper, scissors. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I was like, and then, that gives Cassian the cover he needs to escape. And so
the beast comes and you actually get to see him and he's eating them and
like runs through and so.
But Cassian sneaks around and gets the ship and manages to fly out of there, and we see finally this is Yavin 4.
Yes. Ta-da! Yavin 4. So, yep. But hey, we're good. We're done with that. Unless, of course, they pop up in future episodes, which they very well might, since it is, after all, Yavin 4. I mean, see how many of them survive.
Do they survive? I mean, we haven't liked any of them, so.
I don't like any of them. So they could recast them between now and the next time we see them, and I would not care. I'm sorry. That's mean. But hey, we're done with that arc. Let's move on. And so Ivanhoe woke up, Bilbo woke up, they're ready now to actually go participate in the action of the story.
Yes, he has just been like a prisoner basically this whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. So now we're back. So opening of episode 3, Harvest, and Cassian is trapped inside the circle of the cockpit again.
Yep. And he's trying to figure out what to do, which is probably add the comm device that he took from the other ship into this ship. But he doesn't know how anything works in this ship. But we cut back to the farming community, and they're all having a big meal together, and I love it so much. It's great. And we actually have B like kind of saying like, "Oh, we've got to leave," but he's just playing with kids. He's not aware of the leaving.
Yes, he's playing with the kids. It's so cute. It's like, oh, I love B. He's so adorable. And I think I worry based on the way that this ends that might be the last time we really see B, which makes me so sad. I'm like, no, but I love B.
I love him too.
I know. I'm so sad. Oh, can I share with you a theory? I don't ascribe to this theory, but I want to share it just because I thought it was interesting. I heard some people think that B might be like a source for K2SO.
That's what I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I like it. Yeah.
I have thought that since first season.
Really?
Yeah. Just because like B being reborn as K2SO, like as part of that would give it such a continuity and also such a connection for Cassian to the end, and to give him a different sort of a reincarnation would be really fascinating. It's sort of like how they took L3 and put her into the Falcon.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, all right, I buy it.
Parent is a good guy, and B is K2SO.
And B will be K2SO. Yeah, we'll be reincarnated as K2SO.
If we're wrong, we're wrong. It's fine.
That's all right. That's fine. We've made predictions that are wrong before. It wouldn't be the first time. And then the farmer comes up and is trying to find them a way out. And so it kind of shares, okay, I got you this, pass or whatever. I had to forge it, but it'll get you through, a check if you get stopped tonight or whatever. And then he basically implies that if Brasso has a contact to Luthen, because he, and not by name, of course, but the boss, the big boss, I think they call him. And he says, if you can contact Cassian's friend, the big boss, someone has to tell him what's going on here. And Brasso's like, well, it's going on everywhere.
Yeah.
And, and the farmer responds, why can't they just leave us in peace?
Yeah. And they hug. They hug.
They do. They hug. It's so, and Brasso's huge. I forget what a tall dude he is.
Yeah.
He's such a big guy.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it was so cute and sad, and I'm just like, and that's why I'm so confident that the farmer's a good guy, and why I was a little thrown later when I was like, I didn't understand what was happening.
Oh, yeah. No, I actually have. Yeah, no, I think he's a good guy. I think.
Oh, he absolutely is, but I didn't. I was confused at first, and so I got it later. But like, but it's just he does everything he can to try to help them.
Yeah,
he's genuinely a good person.
We have the wedding dress appearance for Lita, and it's a beautiful dress.
It is gorgeous. It is super pretty, I have to say. Yes, agreed.
And she's nervous, and she walks in, but she almost snagged her dress. That's why she was so sort of flustered and late. And yeah, Mon tries to convince her to just like walk away, be like, no marriage today. Yeah. We've done 2 of the 3 days, no marriage today.
Yeah. And, I'm going to tell you what my mother never told me. You do not have to go through with this.
Yeah.
And Lita says, I wish you were drunk. Because Mon had told her that her mother was drunk on her wedding day. Yeah. And it's like, it is the most crushing thing for Mon.
Yeah. You don't want to be told like, to be like your parents. That's not good.
But not even just that, just the idea that she, it took her so long to get up the courage to
tell her that,
to tell Lita that she didn't think she should go through with it. And Lita blew her off. And because again, Mon missed her window. She might have been able to make that case before, but it was too late. And so, at this point, she cannot stand against the pull of patriarchy. And so she kind of has to accept this loss of her daughter.
Yeah.
And it's very painful. And so they show her, wiping away a tear almost bitterly.
Yeah, but she also turns straight into like a serious person, like, fine, you've made your decision. And like her voice change and her demeanor changes as she wipes that tear away. And she's like, you're to stand behind me.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Just a reminder, you're in my control until you're in his control. Exactly. I hope you understand this in the future. You're not independent.
Yeah. Yeah. And even then, the way, so I thought that the call and response in the wedding was so fascinating. It starts with a maiden is waiting.
Yep.
Right. And so then she comes out, and this is what I talked about earlier. This is the transferring of the maiden, the custody of the maiden from a family member to, usually the father in this case.
And she entered,
the husband.
She entered like walking over a stick too, which is quite common in wedding ceremonies, like to walk over
stepping over
things.
A branch or
or like Chinese weddings, there's sometimes you step over a saddle or you step over different pieces of things to represent different things.
I think a broomstick in African American weddings, and there's a lot. That's a very common thing. So so having step over and then having everyone kind of moving around in a circle, and that again, it indicates the unbroken circle, right?
And
this family.
Wedding rings, and it's also the binding of them to be together forever.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then Perrin, so she steps into the circle after he says,
he invites her in.
Come join my circle.
Yep.
I.e., you're now mine, not hers.
Yep.
Like it's And then Perrin hands her a knife to Second and says, here is a knife. And he says, I will not return this knife.
Yep. And he says, do with it what you will. And that, of course, the transferring of the knife is the transferring of the bride.
Yeah.
It is, I will not return this. She's mine now. And Perrin's like, yep, that's cool. And I mean, it's that everything is about bringing her into his power and control. And as he approaches Lita to cut off her braid, she looks at her mother. Yeah. And so it is the cutting of the braid. So, the braid indicates people being tied together. Also, hair is always like showing who your thoughts are with or who your heart is with. And so the idea is that, her thoughts, her heart, her loyalty was with her family, her mother. And now with the cutting of the braid, that connection is being severed. She's being separated from her family, from her mother. And so she comes under the power of then, the wielder of the knife who is stuck in. And so, so it's beautiful and it's so tragic.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gorgeous and very upsetting to watch. And, brief side note, I know that a lot of fanfic authors are super excited about learning all about Chandlerland weddings and are like building this into their fics. And I think that's cool. But I think it's also important to understand that the context of this particular ritual that we watch is very
patriarchal.
It's very patriarchal. It's very, again, and I want to go back to this thing about the passing of the custody of the bride. This is one of the problems that I actually have with Rey's treatment in the sequel trilogy is that because she never becomes an adult in her own right, it is simply custody of her passes from one male authority figure to the next, right? She's with Han. Then she is with Luke. Then she's actually a Palpatine, which effectively makes her in his custody. And then she passes back into the custody of Luke by declaring herself a Skywalker. She is constantly being transferred from one authority figure to another within a patriarchal system, and she is never an adult in her own right. And just the same, Lita never is becoming an adult in her own right. She is simply passed in custody from parents to husband.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
it's hard.
It's beautiful, though. It was pretty.
Oh my God. It was gorgeous. And we go to a different sort of family event.
Oh, but also circular, though. Interestingly
also
enough.
Circular. 3 chairs around a circular table. And we see them like checking their outfits out in the mirror.
Oh my God.
And
the creepy
Deidre,
smile.
like with her like white outfit versus her black outfit. She goes with the black.
Of course she does.
It's sort of like battle clothes in a way. And they're planning a fondue and who shows up but Cyril's mother.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh
and
my
she
God.
is like a wonderful actress. Like
she's amazing.
We love to hate her so much.
Yes.
She does everything that a terrible mother-in-law will do, which is like,
absolutely.
You're not exactly what I thought you'd look like. You don't have any spiced tea. I'm not allowed to change. Like all of these little
everything
picky things.
Yeah.
That pick on not only the son, but also like the intended daughter-in-law.
Yeah, she is. She's like harassing both of them. She's belittling both of them constantly. And it's everything she's saying is like so pointed and it's intended to hurt. It's intended to tear them down. You know. And of course Dedra, has her number from the beginning. Knows exactly what she's about. And I do enjoy some of the nonverbal communication between Dedra and Cyril during this when like his mother's acting insane and they kind of look at each other and Dedra's giving him the like, what the heck is she doing? Look.
Who hasn't had a parent-in-law?
Oh my gosh.
That is like this.
It's a deeply familiar situation.
Yep, exactly. We flash briefly back to Clea and Cassian, who are able to actually connect. And she's trying to figure out what's going on, and he only hears that he can't call home, and he is off.
Yep, he's done. He hangs up and darts off.
Gone. Yep. And they have fondue. Back to Cyril and to Deidre and to Edie. Sorry. And they're having fondue, and I love fondue so much. But she's like drippy.
Yeah, they make a big point of her being so uncouth. Like, not only is she like dripping that, but then later when they're eating the cake, she's like stabbing it and everything.
Yeah, but she's also like really far away from it. Like the table is not like quite the right size, so everything is like out of reach. And she's a smaller woman, and like I don't know, it would be hard.
Yeah. But they also kind of make her like she's so kind of like proud and haughty, but she's also like, whereas Dedra is so sort of this refined, and she lives in this beautiful apartment. She's very sort of like Dedra is part of like this higher class because of her role with ISB, and we know that the way that Cyril and his mother were living. Remember, they were down so deep that they only saw the sun for like a second every day and stuff like that, right? So there's definitely like very clear class differences here. And so there's a lot of emphasis on how the mother is just like, her manners are so uncouth, even though she claims to have these refined tastes.
Exactly. But we go into, her family. We go into Deidre's family.
Yeah.
I don't have one. I don't have a family. I was raised in an Imperial Kinderblock.
Because her parents were criminals and they were arrested when she was 3.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. This hits like home.
Oh yeah.
Like this is hard. She had everything that she needs. She says, everything but a mother's love. Oh man. this whole like tension, like it felt so real. And
It did.
It felt as real as the cereal scene in the first season.
Yes. It really truly did. No, it's and it's so cold, what she says of like, accept a mother's love. Oh, well, we didn't know what we were missing.
Yeah.
Except she's not being like sarcastic. She means it. Like she's like, yeah, like I didn't need that, basically, is what she's saying.
Exactly.
So
we flash to the wedding intro of the new bride and groom, freshly unbraided, forever united.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yeah. Ouch. I know. I feel the same way.
Yeah. There's a lot of flashing between all of the different storylines. The farmer, former Ferrick's team is packing to leave, and then they go back to the dinner. The mood has changed.
Yep.
And so Cyril's like, I'm leaving for a second here. And he goes, and like we find out later, he's flopped down on the bed face first. And I am obsessed with this thing. So I'm like, this is a whole mood. Yes. I have been there.
Yes. I mean, who among us has not excused themselves to go flop on a bed because your family or in-laws were just too much to handle? Because I want to say we've all been there. Like, but what I love about it is like literally the second he steps away, Dedra's like laying down the boundaries with his mom. And this is where we get to this moment of like, it feels so uncomfortable to be like rooting for Dedra.
I know.
She's awful.
She is awful. I know, but hey, they've made us love them.
Right.
This game ends now. The amount of time that you will spend with him in the future is inversely proportional to the amount of anxiety you generate in our lives. Wow.
Yeah.
I love this moment so much. And yes, it is like a power moment for anyone who has had to deal with a terrible in-law. But it's unrealistic.
Oh, sure. Of course.
But anyone who's dealt with a terrible in-law knows that these sorts of confrontations actually make the person worse.
Okay, so this is, and what's interesting about that is that we're going to get to the question about realism in Star Wars fairly quickly here. No, fairly quickly. That's very relevant to this episode.
Yes.
But in this case, part of the reason why I'm still okay with it is because it's like the whole point is supposed to be that it's like you see Dedra going to bat for her man, and it's important that it works for her so that again we can be like, oh look, they're good for each other, but on some level you also know they're both terrible people, and that this is going to end badly one way or another. So
I don't actually have a problem with the scene because it's very like fantasy fulfillment in some ways. But to me, it's like, I mean, I know, dealing with parents or in-laws, if you push back on them, they push back even harder.
Yeah, they get worse. So it's like, which I don't think is a reason not to set boundaries, but that's a whole other conversation.
No, but it's just more like you have to know what you're dealing with.
You have to know that. You have to know what you're getting into. But so what's funny about it, though, is the way that, so Cyril kind of, he starts to come out of his funk. He overhears them chatting, notices that they seem to be kind of getting along. And so he enters with this like suspicious look on his face. His mother says something nice to him for the first time, says something complimentary. And my favorite thing about it is she finishes complimenting him, and then her eyes sort of dart over to Dedra for approval. And it's so funny because Dedra just looks smug. She's just like, yes, all right.
That's
fine. Want some more cake? Like, it's just like so funny that it's like she immediately was trying to comply with the new rule, which I found hilarious. So, yep.
Want perhaps some more cakes? Yes. So they flash back to the wedding, and it's the reveal of the Shandy Murrel, which is 25,000 years old, which was stolen, or 25,000 years ago was stolen by Rakatan invaders. This is a Legends thing. But Rakatan Prime has never left the like modern canon star maps.
Mhm.
So we've always known it was there, which is cool to actually have the mention of it.
Mhm.
And it's given to Stecken and to Lita. It is the number 9th one, which is a 9.
Yep.
We have some like flashes to this talk of this Chandrillan Nebuian Gorman guy.
Okay, so Erskine, and here's the thing about him. So he is Mon's ward, as far as I can tell, and he frequently functions as like her secretary.
Yeah.
And he is the bastard of a Chandrillan father and a Gorman mother, and was shunned until Mon took him in. So this is very interesting because this gets us into the question of loyalties and, like what's gonna happen, if and when Mon's role is revealed, like this would have a significant impact on Erskine. So I'm very curious to see where they go with that.
Yeah.
And just, Luthen, of course, that the wheels are always turning.
Yeah.
So every conversation he has is something Lisa. In fact, I wouldn't even be surprised because of the fact that he actually approached Skulden with the idea for the Shandy Merle. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually has an ulterior motive related to that as well.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder how much he was like deliberately trying to form a relationship with Skulden, maybe to keep an eye on him or something. Who knows? But I do think that there's always more going on with Luthen.
Absolutely. The dance starts and we see like the DJ come in, which is kind of, and they're playing the same song that they've played in other versions of like Cinderella events, but now it's like a pop version of it, which is fun.
Oh wait, no, we need to talk about Tay is drunk again, and Mon learns that he's been spending time with Skulden, and that confirms her worst fears.
Right. Yes. Sorry.
So like but that's important because that is sort of the moment for her before she talks to Luthen about it, which happens in a later scene. But like that's the moment where she realizes how serious the risk is. Like it's not just that he wants money, it's that he wants money and he's talking to Skulden on the regular.
Right.
And that's just very serious what that indicates. And then we flash over to Will going to say goodbye to Bila.
Right. But the Imperials are checking, and so Will is stuck there with his speeder.
Yep. Yeah. And we see Lieutenant Zala arrives. He tells Bila's mom, make sure you feed all the men, but save 2 meals. Yeah. We'll be back in an hour. And so again, I want to repeat, everybody knows what he's about.
Yeah.
He knows what he's about. This is all premeditated. He tells her to have food ready for him and his driver when they get back. And
he was going to take what he wanted, whether she was happy to go out for dinner with him the first night to Rao or not.
No, it didn't matter. And not only that, but the mother, the farmer's wife, she sees this and sees him leering at her daughter and tells Bila, go inside. Like sees him looking at her and understands exactly what all this means and is like, nope, go in. So she recognizes that he's also a threat to her own daughter.
Yeah.
So, So then we jump back to Mon is now discussing Tay with Luthen. Yeah. And he's, she says she's so upset. She's known him her entire life. And he says, people fail. That's our curse.
Yeah. And you need to be protected.
Yes. You know the number. We'd be vulnerable forever.
Yeah.
So Tay is a loose end. He can only be silenced one way. That's what Luthen is saying. And Mon
let me kill him for you, is the subtext.
Mon claims not to understand, but obviously she does.
Yep.
She knows exactly what he's saying. She just doesn't want to admit it to herself. So that's when the dance begins.
Now DJ Droid.
Yes, DJ Droid.
And the circle dance reminds me of how many circle dances there are in like all sorts of different cultures.
Yes.
And they've been around for like a really, really long time. A lot of circle dances started because of dancing around fires.
Yeah. We did the tarantella at my wedding.
Oh.
Yeah. It's fun. So anyway.
And this
but
next
yeah.
part is quite hard because it flashes between Mon sort of taking a drink, having, letting go and having like a bunch of drinks. And actually in this scene, you can also see Perrin watching her too.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, whoa, she's like letting loose and,
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of different different moments that happen back and forth, like the lieutenant looking in the mirror. So we get this like mirror motif more and more happening from the beginning of the first 3 episode arc. The sort of, him like weighing on her emotionally, like we flash back to Bix and him entering in. He knows she's illegal. Like this is the hard situation that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so icky then when she agrees with him. Like it can't be easy being in your position where you have to balance all of this.
She doesn't know what to do, right?
No, I know.
She doesn't know if it's going to be better for her to express some sympathy with him. And so she tries it because she's not really sure what's going to work best. And so, she's just in a no-win situation, but but even the fact that he okay, so remember the first scene with the nightmare, where the doctor, what's his name, comes in, Gorsh or whatever, comes in and he specifically looks himself in the mirror, but then he pulls the blanket off of her.
Yeah.
And so it already had kind of a sexual connotation from the beginning. And we understood that to be this unresolved trauma she has from the psychological torture. And so what's so upsetting about, then the lieutenant coming in and looking at himself in the mirror and everything is that we understand that this is basically a continuation of her nightmare. This is her nightmare come to life. Right? Her nightmare has come back to her. The psychological torture is now here in the flesh. And so that's what's happening to her in this scene.
Yeah.
Brasso is also cut in with all this. He's been captured by the stormtroopers. And so, then they take him to the silos where he accuses the farmer of betraying them to protect him and his family.
Yeah. He absolutely did not betray them. Like you can tell he's very shocked that Brasso is saying this, but my friend Joe, who was at Celebration, actually posted this on Blue Sky. He said, one of the kindest, most reliable characters of all time is him, is Brasso. He a beacon of selflessness and community. He brought with him the palpable sense of everything would be all right, and that's the way he had to go. I'm so sad about this, but he would have done the same thing for Cassian. He would have done the same thing for Bix. He felt like Kellen, who was helping him this whole time, was already part of his family, and so he would have he would have died to protect his family.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a beautiful and sad moment. And it was subtle. Like I said, I didn't actually understand it correctly until the second time I watched it. First time I was confused. I was like, did I miss something? I didn't think he betrayed them. I was so confused. But then I was like, oh no, Brass was just faking in order to protect him.
And they do focus on the one stormtrooper, once he gets away, that manages to shoot him. And the whole fight scene with Bix mixed with the dance and everything like that is so hard to watch.
It is really hard.
It's intercut, and you kind of just want to be there in the moment with Mon, but they keep on flashing back to this very horrible, hard scene to watch. And there has been a lot of reaction to it, especially that Bix calls it out and says he tried to rape me.
Yeah.
And I think it needed to be said. I understand the reasons why you would want to put it in. I personally think there might have been different ways to do the scene. I don't particularly have a problem with that display of violence in Star Wars because it is something that people gloss over a lot and think it doesn't belong in Star Wars, but if this is adult Star Wars, this is absolutely part of having imperialism. in a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my primary issue is with the execution.
Yeah.
Like, for sure. And so I just want to pose a couple questions to kind of get into where I sort of draw the line and why I'm not really pleased with this on the whole. Like, I understand some of the arguments, but I'm personally not happy with it. And so, couple things. So first question is, who is it intended for? Well, who is the intended audience for this scene? I want to know that. What do you think based on what we've seen from Tony, who do you think the intended audience is for this scene?
Men?
Why?
Because she comes off as a final girl.
Yeah. So I would agree. I think it's geared toward men.
A final girl is a girl from like a horror movie who fights off the horrible creature, but doesn't actually have a lot of connection to how necessarily women might feel in the moment.
And she has a right to survive because she fights, which to me feels deeply unfair to victims. It really does. So that's one thing. The second question then is, what is the intended message? So you said, like, it's been included for a reason. What was the reason that it was included?
I think it shows her as more of a victim personally, but I don't know why that she had to fight. She had to turn into a rebel. Yeah.
Well, the argument, of course, that we've seen is, to your point, this is what happens with fascism and imperialism. And like, that is true. But the question is, what is the intended message? If it is, this is what happens. Okay, we know that's what happens in those systems. And you could make that point without this being as incredibly graphic and long as it is. Okay. And further, like, what those men who are the intended audience of this, what are they supposed to take away from this? Because a lot of times when a rape scene is included in visual media, the intention is to be like, we want to make sure you understand who are the good men and who are the bad men, because bad men rape and good men don't. And the problem is that allows that, in my opinion, that lets a lot of people who participate in rape culture off the hook. Because guess who else is responsible? The driver sitting outside in the transport.
All of those Imperials who are with him.
He knew exactly what was happening in there. He knew exactly why they came there for that. And so my issue with this is that no matter the intention here, ultimately it objectified Bix. It makes the victim an object by definition.
Yeah, she's no longer a person in the story. Right. Yeah.
She is an object to teach whatever lesson you think needs to be taught to the men who are your audience. And that completely glosses over and ignores the experience of women and how women respond to this. And
there was also not appropriate trigger warnings, at least when
there were no trigger warnings.
Looked at the episode, there was not appropriate trigger warnings, which I don't know a woman who doesn't fear every day of her life for something like this or hasn't already experienced it.
It was terrifying. It was so terrifying. I rewatched this so that I could take notes for this, and I pretty much didn't watch that scene. Like, I basically I had to go with just the audio for my rewatches. I couldn't actually really focus on the visuals because it was way too upsetting, and even that was still upsetting. It was just it just goes on so long, and it's so, like you said, it sort of gets to a primal deep fear that so many people feel. And I just think that was just completely inappropriate level to go to. So I don't necessarily have a problem with having, a reference to sexual violence in Star Wars. I think that you can make a strong argument that it makes sense in the context of the show. I think my problem with it is the execution of it, I think, was incredibly insensitive.
Yeah.
Incredibly insensitive. And, in some ways it almost feels a little bit like, obviously completely different situation, but similar in terms of treatment, the way that the whole frog lady thing was treated, where we didn't take the eggs seriously. And it was very triggering for a lot of people who have experienced infertility. And that was unnecessary.
Exactly. And I don't know what the logic was, honestly. It just tells me that maybe they didn't have enough time with the scripts.
Yeah, well, I think that, we had maybe discussed that it's possible the strike had something to do with it. Like, it just felt like something that maybe didn't get workshopped enough. And, there were not enough conversations that probably should have happened about this. And, so as a result, but I promise I'll wrap up, but this is my last point I want to make. Even the conversations that we are being forced to have about this as a result of the way that it was done, those conversations are triggering too. Yeah. Because now you're getting stupid comments from people like, Darth Vader wouldn't be okay with sexual violence or something stupid like that, which, like, that's the dumbest. Like, what? No, come on. But, like, so we're having the conversation it's still objectifying. It just is like, it's not, this whole thing does not center survivors. And anytime you are going to do something like this in a story, your goal should be to center survivors, because that's how you do it in a way that is respectful and treats the subject with the gravity that it deserves. So
I agree with you.
We'll see what they do with Bix's character, but I would argue they have dug themselves a very difficult hole here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah, overall, except for the end of this episode, I really loved this 3-episode arc. I struggled a lot with the rebels and, like, the why of Cassian basically being stuck somewhere. But yeah, it was enjoyable. I enjoyed it, and it was nice to be back in this world.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'm still excited about the rest of the season. I truly am. I just think there were aspects of this that were a rocky start, and so I'm gonna focus on the pieces that I really enjoyed, and I look forward to the rest of the season. The preview, I guess, reviews or whatever you want to call them, kind of indicate that it only gets better from here, which I'm very excited for. So I think it's going to be great. But yeah, I think it's important also to kind of, like, call out some of the missteps in some of these early episodes. But that takes us to then, so Will shows up, shoots at the corporal, but then Bix takes him out completely. So now, both of these perpetrators are dead. Cassian bombs the transport and the stormtroopers to defend Brasso. But then by the time he gets down there, unfortunately, Brasso is already dead. And he is able to then flee with Will and Bix. And then we cut back, as you said, to Perrin noticing how much Mon has really let loose. And we see Tay going out to his car, and who is waiting there, having replaced his driver?
But Cinta.
Cinta.
Yeah. And Vel sees this, and so is like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and I saw somebody point out that Vel has no dialogue in this episode. And it's true, she has none, but she has so many beautiful little moments. There's her during the wedding ceremony where you can see she's just really, really crushed and really sad, about all this that's happening. You see she offers Mon a moment of support when Lita and Stekken walk in, and Mon is, grabs Vel's hand, and Vel holds her hand to support her. And, and then obviously when she sees Cinta, and she's just she knows exactly what she's doing, and she's devastated. And then a little bit later, we see her kind of, sitting off by herself, in a corner, and she's sitting next to this window where the light, is cast on her as if she's in kind of a cage or something. And it's just, and she's outside the circle, by the way. There's a circular doorway, and she's not in it. She's next to it. So she's outside the circle. So this idea of, like, Vel is outside that circle of protection because she's not part of that system. So I thought that was so interesting too. So many great little moments right there. And then, of course, Cassian just looking broken
at the end.
He's escaping. Yeah.
Somebody pointed out that he looks back the way Marva looked back at him when when he was taken off of his original planet.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
It's so sad.
So yeah, I mean, definitely.
Overall, like, I struggle with, like, sort of open endings, but that's what this is gonna be, right?
Of course.
Because we're waiting for the next episode. But I'm I'm excited for next week. And I hope people have enjoyed our discussion and our deep dive into the show. And if you would like to leave a comment, you can find us on Blue Sky or on Instagram or on YouTube, and leave a comment or a question, and we'll try to get to a couple of those during our next episode.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Missy, where can people find you if they're looking for you?
Please look for me on Tumblr, where I am All Girls Are Princesses.
Amazing. All right, everyone. See you all next week. Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force. Brad, Melody, Night Huntress in Wild Space, Felicia, How Rude, Anna Perez, Macau Mom, Neil, James, Joellen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C, and Susan. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. Check out our other channel on YouTube or other podcast feeds, What the Fiction. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or our website, whattheforce.ca, or on our Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.